the commitment to not harming life. And then, of course, included in this is our commitment in our privileged locations, whether as white folk or as people who are able-bodied, or as people who are able to access resources, or those of us who have citizenship, those of us who speak English as our first language, those of us who are heterosexual, those of us who were brought up Protestant, those of us who've been formally educated through finishing high school and college, just to name a few, that wherever we're privileged, we are today committing to inquiring into how not to continue the harming of that privilege. Yeah. That's one of the more fundamental. We commit to not harming life. That's our commitment, isn't it? And then we're committed to not stealing, not taking what isn't freely offered. Of course, I could spend days talking about that, but for now I'm not going to. But just to acknowledge that it's far and wide, to become aware of how we are relating to the earth and what's growing and living on her and in her, the air and the waters. We're committed not to harm in our sexual expression. We are committing not to harm in our speech, not to lie, alter the truth, not to flatter for our own gains, or perhaps becoming more sensitive to speaking at the right time, whenever it's most appropriate. The Buddha calls out that particularly with his son, Rahula. Learning how to stay connected to our intention to bring healing instead of blabbing in ways that aren't helpful or healing. And then lastly, we're committed to become aware of what we take in that might challenge the balance of our minds and hearts, whether it's alcohol or too much TV or other substances. Orienting towards healing with care. Thank you. So I think because I've already spoken for a lot, I'm just going to give some simple instructions, and then we'll sit in silence as a way to ground, and then we can see how that goes. Perhaps we can begin by acknowledging that we're living in a body. Opening to the life of that body. See if for those of us who might be living with pain, if you can find one place in the body that isn't in pain. Maybe the tongue or ears. Appreciating the blessings of tongue or ears or body. That's enabling us to heal and open, carrying our consciousness and spirit of love. Relaxing, opening and receiving the communications of life through sensations. Tingling, vibration, pressure, hot, cold. We don't have to be anywhere different than we are. Bowing to our life force in these expressions. Not trying to go for anything. Just another moment of relaxing, receiving this multitude of communications. Relaxing in the receiving of them. We don't have to do anything. Presence is not a doing, but an opening, a willingness to allow. And then see if you would like to anchor or stay open. You can anchor in one part of the body or in the breath or sound. Bearing witness to the sensations, if it's the breath of the in-breath and out-breath. Or the coming and going of sounds. Or the warmth of the tongue in the mouth, surrounded by saliva. returning when the mind wanders off. The mind might have wandered off, no problem. Appreciating the reconnection. Checking to see if there's friendship there. Am I being kind in this moment? We don't have to fix it, but just acknowledge. May I? If there's no kindness, may I be kind in this moment? As we come to the end of this practice period, see if you would like to take a moment to appreciate your effort. Acknowledging the moments of mindfulness, of presence, of knowing, of patience, or of commitment and determination, of holding through. Of the wisdom that's underneath these efforts, inspiring them. Turning towards our beautiful qualities and acknowledging them. Seeing how they live and guide us. Appreciating them. Thank you for your efforts. So the theme of today is this turning towards how the beautiful energies are living inside of us and outside of us, and particularly acknowledging these energies. And so it might be that this last sitting was incredibly distracted, or you were in a storm of thinking. Even so, taking a moment to acknowledge the wish to be present, or that you sat through the sitting. Because the cultivation of joy in our hearts rests on the acknowledgement of not turning away from, but turning towards the beautiful qualities that live inside of us. And it feels often difficult to do that because it feels sometimes either not real or not socially acceptable, or yeah, they might be there, but what about, I was so distracted or bored or whatever it is. So much about joy is building the balanced acknowledgement of what's living, and often we turn away from what's beautiful and not acknowledge it as much as the difficult energies. And so as we move into our movement or walking period, I want to support that framing for all of us. That we are dedicating this next 25 minutes to being present in our bodies through whatever movement you do, walking, yoga, tai chi, qigong, or just stretching. Towards this appreciation and acknowledgement. It's beautiful that I'm dedicating this next 25 minutes to being present and to caring for my body by being present, and through this movement, through this walking. So it might be slow walking of lifting, placing, and shifting of each step, or fast walking, stepping, 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 or any other of these movements. See if you can begin with appreciation and end with appreciation, turning over and over again to your patience and commitment or wisdom or generosity of giving yourself this time to be with yourself. Yeah. Okay, and I will ring a bell. So let's come back at 11:35 so that we have 25 minutes, and I will ring a bell a little bit before then to bring you back. So maybe then you can unmute yourself so you can hear the bell to bring you back. Okay, great. So I want you to be able to see my feet, because mindfulness of walking is really like mindfulness of breath. We bring our presence to our body and feet and the movement of the body as we walk. And so we can walk in the beginning, and it can just be that we're walking and we're noticing the movement of the hips, of the knees, of how the shoulders are moving. And that could be mindfulness of walking. However, there is a traditional walking that breaks the sequence of the steps down into 3. And you can try that with me. And so the beginning is allowing the right foot to be lifted and placed on the ground. And we notice the placing. We can even say that gently in our mind, and then shift. And notice the shifting of the sensations, lifting. And then it's like our feet know how to walk. So we notice that placing on the earth, and then we notice the shifting again. Lifting, placing, and shifting. And lifting, placing, and shifting. And we can either slow that down a lot more, or we can speed it up. So one really slow is like lifting, lifting, placing, shifting, 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 shifting. And this very like sort of dropping into the sensations of those different sequences. Or we could go placing, placing, placing. So we could speed it up or slow it down depending on what's most supportive of the mind. Placing, 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 placing. Or we could just do it a little more quickly, and we could count the steps. For now, just simply 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it just depends. It just depends on what feels most conducive to the capturing the mind. Yes, a question, Elizabeth?
No question.
You good? Okay, great, enjoy. So I wanted to just frame a little bit the condition, the understanding and condition for calling in and living with and inhabiting joy. Because whether we name it as the habitual mind, or ignorance or social oppression, or the ways that we grew up in our families or schools or culture, that reflected back to us in some way that we are not deserving of our place, of a home, of reclaiming the sacredness of life. We find ourselves in these places, or when they're living, somehow believing the messages that is true, that we are not deserving of joy or happiness, that we are not deserving of a home, of respect, of inhabiting our lives as sacred. And these feelings aren't there because there's something wrong with us. It's because the place and the ways of relating that bring us home into the sacred and into joy haven't been supported and strengthened. And there are all the reasons that we know, and what's beautiful about what's happening in this moment right now with each of us is that there is something inside of us that knows that we are deserving of that home, that we are deserving of finding our way back into our lives, that we could describe as, yes, here is life and it is sacred. This life here, this body here, this heart, mind here. And that's our journey. And it is so sacred to want that, to hear the calling of that, and to respond to it. And we know that the turning towards this life and turning towards seeing our beautiful qualities as the practice towards finding what is sacred is bumpy, is not always open and flowing and full of ease. But that doesn't mean that it isn't of deepest value and importance. So when we took the refuge of our Buddha nature, we were taking this path of saying, I want to reclaim my life as sacred. And so much of this culture, and we've seen such a testimony to that, doesn't respect me as sacred, no matter what my location. And so we can see how deep and profound it is to begin to name that path, to begin to say, I want to come home to that. I don't think there's anything more important in our lives than doing that. And then finding the technologies that support that to happen. And the cultivation of joy is one of them. It's not that we're thinking of joy as just some transitory pleasure, which is good. It's lovely to have transitory pleasure. I'm not putting it down at all, and neither does this path and our lineage. And there is a path that goes deeper than that, which is building a relationship whose expression is one of joy. And there are two ingredients, and we've heard one of them already a lot, and that is the ingredient of being present. That without that, there is no path. And so to begin with, right here and now, let's take a moment to appreciate that we want to be present. That we want to be present in a way that unlocks joy. That we want to be present in a way in which we relate to our lives as sacred and honorable and deserving of respect. And how beautiful that wanting is, or that calling is, that brought us, each of us here, to this moment together today. It's a sacred calling, and it's beautiful, and we can appreciate that we want to. Learn how. That we want to strengthen what we've already learned. So, honoring our capacity to be present. And in today, we are particularly giving attention to those moments when we've been present, rather than all the moments where we haven't. Because the cultivation of joy rests in the acknowledgement, in that turning towards what is beautiful and present. And so if you would be willing just for a moment to reflect either on this last walking or movement period, on the sitting, and appreciate the moments of presence. Whether what you were present of was pleasant or unpleasant, doesn't matter. For this moment, appreciating that we were present. That when we forgot, at some point or another, we returned. Because that's the path of coming home. And we want to appreciate our capacity for our remembering that we were present. And that in the acknowledgement, not in general, but a particular moment now, if you can remember, a particular moment of coming back and seeing the strength of that and appreciating it. I forgot and something brought me back. And we can have joy in that. So taking joy in our capacity to be present. And then for the rest of today, beginning to open up and have joy in the other beautiful qualities that are present. And that might be our wish to be kind, our patience, our perseverance, the fact that we want to be honest with ourselves, to turn and know ourselves as we are. It could be having joy in our wisdom, that we know this is a path of healing, that we have faith in it, so joy in our faith. Joy in the moments of collectedness, that we're not distracted. Joy in our courage, our willingness to be present. Sometimes it's scary. Joy in that courage of saying, it's scary and I'm still willing. Joy in that even if I believe some of the judgments I have of myself, or some of the ways that I have blamed myself or shamed myself, I still have joy that I'm holding through with the practice. I can have so much joy in that. So entering into this training of seeing the beautiful qualities whenever they arise, of seeing our intentions, not seeing, that's the incorrect word, of acknowledging our intentions, the beauty of them, the wholesomeness of them, the skillfulness of them, and having joy in them, because they're the very beginning of our path. Without the intentions, there's nothing else that follows, right? Talking about our beautiful intentions. So we're orienting towards what's beautiful. And so we'll begin this next sitting with that. Okay. So finding a comfortable position, or as comfortable as possible given the imperfections of the body. And see if you would like to begin with an intention. May I become sensitive. May I know the beautiful qualities that are already living inside of me. May I build a relationship with them so that they're alive and current in my life. May I have joy in them. May I have joy right now in my wish to be kind to myself. May I take joy in my wish to honor and respect myself in this life just as it is. And I don't have to feel the feelings, but I can orient towards, turn towards this practice. Calling in joy for the beautiful qualities that already live inside of me. I might not have mentioned what you would like to acknowledge. Taking a moment to acknowledge that. See if you can open to the physical sensations of your patience or kindness, of the wish to feel joy, just the wish. How does it live in your body? Relaxing, allowing these energies to communicate themselves to you in their physical expression, vibration, warmth, tingling. Relaxing into the field. It's safe, wholesome energies like joy and kindness and the wishes for them are safe, creating a refuge in which you can relax. No harm can come from them. And then see if you would like to continue to offer these intentions to yourself, or if you would like to stay with the physical sensations or your breath, wherever you feel called. May I have joy, my patience, faith, or presence. Returning if the mind has wandered. it feels very much like a dance, actually. The ways that as we open, so I'm going to first start with you, Amy, and say that the ways when we first open to joy or even orient towards joy, that immediately brings us to the places of grief inside of us. And that is the nature of this healing path, that often as we open, it lifts up what needs to be acknowledged and given space for. And so it might be that when we think about joy and then suddenly we're in the middle of deep grief, that we're not practicing joy. And it is a developmental path where we heal, and in the traditional language, it's called purification, where the heart opens and lifts up what hasn't been felt or has been but needs more of whatever, rage, grief, sadness, depression, paralysis, whatever is lifted up. And then that's what we get to be present for. And so I want to say this about the complexity of these aspects of joy. Because on the one hand, we can rest on our beautiful qualities. And then on the other, actually by being present for our grief or paralysis or desperation or whatever it is, there is a kind of joy in that, because we are not abandoning ourselves by turning away from those energies. So then, in response to what you were saying, Ellen, and what you were saying, Pam, is that just the turning towards it, not the staying on the conceptual level, like I've killed all these bees, or oh my God, this therapist and the story, and I'm totally confused. Not on that level, but on the actual feeling level of how you're feeling. The feeling of having to kill all the bees, or the feeling of having someone that you've been deeply engaged with turn against you. That feeling, if we can be present for that, or even connect with the wish to be present, honey, I want to hold you. This is horrible, and I want to hold you with my kindness and caring, because this is what's happening. I've got bees and I have to kill them. Or I opened up and someone said these things to me that don't make any sense to me. I'm so confused and hurt. That, can we hold that with our wishes for caring? So sometimes I say to myself, I want you to know, Arinna, I want to care for you. And in this situation, I'm learning how. I can't quite fully get to the caring, but I want you to know I want to learn how. And so really the key or the gateway to the joy that is actually accessible in these places is dropping from the thought, I shouldn't be having these feelings. This is wrong. How come I'm having this feeling? Or I know I shouldn't have killed those bees, or this is so harmful for me, or whatever it is, whatever the thought is, dropping the thought and meeting what the experience is in the body. I want you to know I care for you. Contraction, hardness, confusion, dissociation. I feel totally traumatized. Dissociation. I want you to know I'm learning how to care for you. If we can go to that place, then we can also include white privilege. I want you to know unconscious acting out of white privilege. I'm learning how to care for you because I know if there isn't caring, there isn't healing. Again, that means dropping from the thinking level to what's living in my body as I think about myself as an entitled person who has been conditioned not to care. I want to learn how to care for that place. But if I can't meet it with presence and caring, then I continue to act out those unconscious negative energies, right? So that means we get to turn towards that place too with caring and with our presence. And the more we can, the more it's held in the relational field, the more that wisdom that comes from that guides me in how to become more conscious and aware of those dynamics and to begin to end them. So just to say this in another way, which I know we've all heard, but it's a helpful mantra, which is whenever there's any sense of blame or shame or judgment or believing there's something wrong with me, or shame and blame and judging anyone else, there is never a path for healing and freedom. Because the whole fundamental basis of these teachings rests on the understanding that it is particular skillful and wholesome qualities that become the conditions for freedom and liberation, and particular energies that constitute oppression and suffering. And Buddhism is explicit about this, totally explicit. And the Buddha was, that if there is ignorance, anyway, I'll stop there because I can continue to talk about that in the Dharma talk. So enough for now. Does that make sense what I've said? Yeah. And so then I want to make the bridge into joy, which is I can take joy. I can call in joy for being present to these places. Because there is a kind of joy that is accessible when we're present to these places. It isn't the kind of joy of, oh my God, this ice cream is delicious type of joy. But there is this kind of sense of having joy that we are taking care of ourselves in a difficult place. And it's accessible if we turn towards it. So there isn't just this, for example, the dropping of the storyline, the turning with the intention and wish, may I care for you and be present for you. And as I say that wish, perhaps we're not in control of it, right? Perhaps this energy of presence is there. Oh, this is how it is, honey. And because it is, may I care for this arising. And as I do, and as I'm present and caring for this arising, there's that access to acknowledge what I'm doing, that I'm caring and strengthening and healing. And in that is joy. And so this path of joy isn't about pleasantness. it's about the joy that comes from being willing to be present and caring in all kinds of situations. So then there is the joy of the beauty of the mountains or the sunset or of something beautiful. And that's a beautiful joy too. There is the joy of turning towards my generosity and enjoying that I am generous or can be generous or want to be generous or have been generous. And then there's the joy of holding through the difficulties. So the joy of saying, I am willing to open and feel the pain of ignorance, because that is what we are bearing witness to. I'm willing not to turn away, but to be present and to feel what's happening. There's profound harming that has continued to exist for hundreds of years and longer, but in the present form is racism. And sexism. Directed, that combination of racism and sexism together when it's directed towards African American woman or Latinx woman or indigenous woman, a particular type of harming that happens in those different locations. But I am willing to hold it. And it isn't, that holding isn't about blaming the perpetrators, because then there's no capacity to hold it. It is saying, here is ignorance. Here is dissociation. And I know that because I've held it in my own mind and body. And I've cared for it in my own mind and body. And so I can hold it and care for it in another's. So seeing that policeman kneeling down, totally disembodied, so disembodied, he didn't know what he was doing. And I have done a lot of things where I haven't been conscious of what I was doing. So not in that intensity of taking life. But I have harmed and not known what I was doing in the moment of harming. And I can hold that. And so I hold that rage, that disembodiment, that dissociation. And I'm present for it. And I understand what a gift that is, to be willing to do that. And that's where there's joy too. Just the joy of strength and courage. That's the invitation. And that's from that openness comes the movement from the heart, not I'm doing this because it's politically correct, though that's a good beginning, if that's the beginning. But then underneath it is the movement of the heart that calls me into action. Okay. So that's taking us to the time when we end for our lunch period. Let's take a moment to appreciate our presence. our listening, our sharing, our willingness to learn. What a beautiful quality. Let's turn towards that in acknowledgement and appreciation. Have joy in that. Not the joy, but just that beauty of the strength of connection that comes from saying, I'm willing to learn. Thank you. This meditation is a guided meditation in Cultivating Joy. And it rests on the understanding that we have these beautiful energies living inside of us all the time. And that we can turn towards them more and support them and grow them. In the same way that we use metta phrases to support and grow metta, we can do this for joy as well. So let's see, are we, yes, here we are. Very good, okay. So traditionally, we offer the opportunity for people to lie down or to slouch or to find a comfortable position for this guided meditation. And so I don't know if you've already had a nap over lunch or if you haven't. And if you want to stay awake, then don't lie down. If you would like a little snooze to a guided mudita meditation, that's fine. So your choice. To begin with this meditation, we're invited to recollect one particular instance where you have experienced your own generosity or your own kindness. When you have felt a moment of love for another human being or for yourself. And we're invited to really remember or recollect. The Buddha uses the word recollect. Recollect this moment. Remembering the context. But I'll give you just a moment to remember it. You don't have to go searching for the perfect moment. There are many, but just whatever comes up for you, where you have given from a freely giving heart without, should I give this? Shouldn't I give it? That's okay too. For a moment of just unhindered kindness towards yourself or another human being. Remember the context in which it happened. The environment, if you were in a particular room or inside or outside. the time of day or night, the situation where you were sitting, standing, walking, lying down. Remembering yourself or another human being or a community of human beings who were involved in this recollection. And then remembering the feeling in your body, how it felt to be that open in caring or giving. Then letting the whole situation fall away and staying connected to this feeling. And offering the wish that it might strengthen and grow. Generosity, thank you for living inside of me in this moment. May you continue to strengthen and grow in my life. Or love, caring, thank you for living inside of me. May you continue to strengthen and grow and feel at home inside of me in this life. You're welcome. Staying connected to your body. And your wish. And then in your own rhythm, repeating it. Thank you for living inside of me, for visiting me in the way you did. May you feel at home in this body-mind process. May you feel invited to grow, strengthen, take care of me, guide me. You can stay with this one quality, or you can call up another one. It might be that you have been blessed with a particularly strong expression of patience or energy or determination, or that you can easily remember a time where you were courageous, even in the face of feeling fear. You were willing to step in or step out. And again, remembering this time clearly, where you remember it manifesting. And if you can't, that's fine too. Just feeling it in your body and offering these same wishes. Patience. Thank you for living inside of me, even though it hasn't happened so often. Thank you for the times it has. I appreciate you. May you continue to strengthen and guide me in my life. Let's remember to include mindfulness. One particular moment that stands out, or moments of being present, or maybe even right now or this morning. Thank you. Mindfulness for living inside of me, guiding me, returning over and over again with the blessings you bring me. May you continue to strengthen and grow. These beautiful qualities as our dear friends. If you want, you can have a conversation with one of these qualities. It doesn't have to be repetitious. The Buddha invited us particularly to contemplate our virtue. A moment or moments when you have refrained from harming life. It could be that you step to avoid an act. That you wore a mask when it felt like a big effort. Took care to practice distancing. There might have been a time when you wanted something but didn't steal it. Refrain from taking what wasn't really offered. When you wanted to connect with someone sexually and they said no and you respected that. Or even though you really wanted to blab out everything, you held back because you knew it wouldn't be helpful. Find your own rhythm and contemplate each of the precepts and where you've upheld them, appreciating your virtue. The Buddha said this was particularly important, to acknowledge the gift of blamelessness and safety that we offer through this practice to ourselves and others, and the joy that comes from it. You could phrase it any way you like. Thank you for caring and not taking life. May you continue to guide me and grow stronger. Thank you for not stealing, for respecting the caretaking of others. May you continue to strengthen virtue inside of me, guide me, grow in me. Keep remembering the ways you have been virtuous rather than the times you haven't. Sustaining the recollection in our virtue. And then taking this next last minutes of our meditation to let go of all the thoughts, the intentions, the blessings, and the wishes. To appreciate the offerings that you gave yourself and these energies as a physical experience. Opening in appreciation in the body. To the blessings of these energies and how they've infused our life. That means relaxing, letting go, allowing what's supporting you to support you, giving space for these energies and your appreciation of them, how they live as a particular physical sensation in the mind and the body. Not trying for anything, but rather relaxing, being present. That's all. Thank you. So it might have been that in this meditation there was the intention and and the wish, but that there was no access. And I wanted to mention that that doesn't matter. Just the orientation towards those wishes and just saying those wishes is the strengthening. Whether it manifests in the moment or not, is not so important. So as we come out of it, I want to safeguard your beautiful minds by supporting you in not becoming a judge of your experience, but resting in the appreciation of your efforts and intentions. Because it is that turning and that different orientation that gives life to what that beautiful saying of Thomas Merton, which is, if you could only see the real beauty. I know this wasn't exactly his words, but I thought I brought it, but I didn't. If you could only see the real beauty you are, you would kneel down and bow down to yourself and to others. But if for this moment to ourselves, if we could see or discern the real beauty of ourselves, we would bow down to ourselves. And so we're on this path of orienting over and over again to this acknowledgement of the reality of who we are, right? We're not making it up. We're turning to what is already living inside of us. And as we turn and acknowledge and embody, so there is that reality. If you could only see the beauty you are, you would keep falling down and bowing down to yourself. So, okay, let's take this next 25 minutes then to walk or stretch. And I want to put in a word for the discipline of doing it, because there's something, I don't know, maybe some of you know this already. There's something about opening our hearts in this way and then grounding it by doing something physical. It really makes a difference. And it also sustains the continuity of the practice. So you might think that this part, and when I'm talking, is the important part, and the walking or stretching isn't. But that actually isn't true. They're equally important. And it's also, I would, but it might drive you nuts, just like keep on what we've been doing, but as you're stretching, giving thanks to your body, or as you're walking, feet, thank you for being able to walk. Or if your hands are working, or if your tongue is working, or your ears are working, just offering thanks, that continuity of connecting with the blessing of what's actually happening. And so enjoy not only your beautiful heart, but your beautiful body as well. I'll ring the bell to bring us back at 3. So then I just wanted to, I'm going to go into some of the formal presentation that the Visuddhimagga, which is some of the commentaries of the Buddha's teaching that was written 500 years after his death, and is probably one of the most comprehensive commentaries that there are of the Buddha's teaching. I'm going to go into the traditional set of cultivation, some of which we've done and some of which we haven't, on calling joy into our lives. But I did want to thread back into naming again, maybe that's what it is, naming again the conditions that we have found ourselves in our lives and in our communities and in the cultures that we live in. And I'm coming from a particular perspective, and you might not agree with it, and that's fine. So my perspective is integrated my life experiences, and so I'm going to speak from that. So the Buddha certainly didn't say what I'm saying now. I'm saying it from my own direct experience. And then I'll go into the traditional teaching. So my experience is that wherever there is the economic structure of the profit motive of capitalism or colonialism, and the cultures that have grown up alongside of that, there is always a reflection, even for those in power, of ourselves as deficient and insufficient. And that is a core invitation for naming. And I'm saying that because over and over again, I catch myself judging myself when I am in doubt, or when I am critical or judgmental, or when I watch myself blaming some situation or some person. And to say it in other words, that when there are structures that depend on exploiting particular communities for profit, or most communities for profit, and where very few people reap the benefit, there necessarily has to be a negative reflection of our humanity, because otherwise there wouldn't be able to be the justification for that exploitation. Along with that are other systems of disrespect and exploitation. And I mentioned them, and you all know them already. Racism and sexism and heterosexism and classism and ableism and xenophobia and religious intolerance, elitism. So all these systems benefit one group, and that benefit is based culturally on a negative reflection, an incapacity to see the integrity and beauty of those peoples that are being disenfranchised and exploited. And so I'm saying, of course, in our own minds, we have internalized those negative expressions. And even if you're in the privileged location, it is impossible to be part of a set of relationships where you are disrespecting others and respecting yourself. You can't do that. Disrespect is an energy that lives inside of you, which means you can't not disrespect yourself too. In fact, the reason that these systems have taken hold in the ways they have is, according to the Buddha, because each one of us is born with the wiring of ignorance and disrespect. We're born with that capacity. Every human being is, until we're fully awakened. It isn't because one of us are particularly bad. And the psychological experience of this ignorance is that we don't feel we have a real home. That even though we have a blood family, we don't feel like really it's our family. Or it might be that we feel in some deeply inherent way insufficient and inadequate. Or it might be that we feel isolated and disconnected from life around us. These are the experiences of how ignorance lives inside of us. And this kind of way of living in this vacuum, it's not emptiness as in the Buddhist definition of emptiness, but a lacking, this not fitting in, is described in the suttas, in the Buddha's teaching, as an axle that doesn't fit properly in the wheel. Or, you know, when your chain on the bicycle doesn't fit and it keeps slipping, and you make all this effort and the bicycle won't go because the chain keeps slipping, or the cart can't go because the axle doesn't fit properly. That sense of not fitting, right? That is one of the images used to describe dukkha and suffering, that not fitting in. And it's deep and profound. It's deep and profound. And it's when this system is triggered in us, when this dynamic or wiring is triggered in us, that insufficiency or emptiness moves out in the misunderstanding that if I control, or if I go for pleasant experiences, or if I can get some sense of power, then I will feel better. They all together, because mostly we want control and access for pleasant experiences. And in this emptiness, pleasant experiences become like a God, you know, like this huge thing, because it does give us temporary relief. And because so much of this culture is oriented around pleasant experiences and access to resources for pleasant experiences, we're caught in this never-ending struggle of trying to control life in ways that give us pleasant experiences. And again, I just want to reiterate that in itself, pleasant experiences are fine. Pleasant is pleasant, it's lovely, but it isn't where our deepest fulfillment and liberation lie. And in this emptiness, when the culture reflects negatively, then that reinforces the emptiness of and the expression of insufficiency, not deserving, inadequacy. And it is deeply rooted, and I'm naming reality, right? If it wasn't so deeply rooted, we'd all be awakened already. It's deeply rooted. And so this means that we can't just address one or the other, that we have to address both, that we have to turn towards that wiring inside of ourselves and heal it, or purify it, as the Buddha says. And we have to address systems that keep acting upon us and triggering that system negatively as well. So we're on this journey together, right? And then to begin with, naming this wiring of ignorance inside of ourselves and turning towards it with love. I didn't choose you, but I was born with you. And my work is to learn to hold you with love and caring. And as you arise inside of me, doubt, a lack of faith, despondency, despair, depression, anger, rage, hatred, craving, addiction, attachment, and all those energies that are part of the system as they arise. It isn't about an argument. It's about understanding what's happening and calling in our presence and our love to hold those energies, because they're there. And they're there inside of us and they're there outside of us, because every human being has them. And when systems trigger this wiring, then they're really out there. And that's what we're seeing right now, extremely. And so we're called to name what's happening and to bring that caring. And we know from our own experience, from the times when we have felt despair or when we have felt really lost, the power of having a friend or a mentor or someone in our life who has been a witness and a loving witness to what's happening. And the power of presence and kindness to heal. And that's why the Buddha said in the Satipatthana Sutta, if you practice mindfulness or awareness or presence, I guarantee, he didn't use that word, he said you will end suffering. You will end this whole dynamic that lives inside of you that brings despair and dis-ease. He was saying this is the path. The path is the cultivation of presence and awareness. And we know that. We can feel the difference between when we're present and when we're not. That aliveness. When we're like, oh, I just got it, I'm here. And then there are all these supportive practices that create the environment for awareness to live and be sustained and nurtured. And one is love, and the other is joy, and the other is compassion, and equanimity, and generosity, and virtue, all the beautiful qualities that support and invite presence and awareness, and presence and awareness is the ground for all of these to grow. They're interwoven together. That is to say, when the Buddha said the whole of the Dharma is the cultivation of the beautiful qualities and the abandoning of the unwholesome ones. That is the Dharma. That is liberation. That is freedom and awakening. The cultivation of the beautiful qualities and the abandoning of the unskillful ones. The qualities that feed ignorance. That anger. And I'm not saying anger isn't understandable. When we're triggered, it's deeply understandable. But there's a difference between holding it in that field and feeding it, because anger is a movement towards disconnection. And we know that from the times we've been enraged. And then the opposite of anger is and part of it maybe, is what paralysis. I mean, in this field of ignorance. And we know that too, that feeling of I can't move, it's hopeless. And that's disconnecting. And so as we explore it, and we don't even have to take what the Buddha says or any of these liberated teachers say, we can explore for ourselves what happens when these energies are in my mind and I believe their storyline. What happens to me? And always, there's one thing that always happens, and that is we feel profoundly and deeply isolated, because that is one of the main characteristics of ignorance, is the isolation and the separation from life. And if there is an antidote to exploitation and disenfranchisement, it has to be in the building of community. And community cannot happen unless we're connected to our hearts, and through that to everyone else's. And when I say connected to our hearts, I don't just mean love and joy. I mean connected to those energies of anger and paralysis and disenfranchisement. That sense of, I am here bearing witness to you and holding you and understanding that you're here and giving you a field in which to live because you are living and alive. That's where the connection happens. And then when someone else is in that space, then we have that capacity to hold it. Of course. And in that field of allowing comes love. Love, there's no other way for love to grow than in that field of allowing. So then I understand my work as a human being to learn about this dynamic of ignorance that lives inside of me and how it got conditioned into behaviors of privilege and a feeling of victim in my disenfranchised location. That's the ignorance part. And also I'm learning, and that's what we're doing today, about my inherent and unlimited capacity to heal and transform them. To touch into those beautiful qualities and resources that allow me to challenge and to heal, to grow, and to embody freedom and caring and relationship in new ways. It's hard to say words to the process because as a 70-year-old, I can give testimony to how difficult the road is, because it is. But then I don't think we have a choice, really. I don't think our hearts even give us a choice, because we have such a deep yearning to come home. And we come home when ignorance and greed and craving and attachment aren't present. When they're not present, when they're not alive, then there is caring and mindfulness. And so one of the definitions of nirvana is a moment freed of greed, hatred, and delusion, and the ignorance that supports them. And so in those moments when I am appreciating my generosity or my love, in those moments when I'm acknowledging my virtue, I am free. When there isn't anything else in the mind except that acknowledgement and appreciation and we build it and continue to support it. And we build it and support it in these two realms. And the Buddha is explicit about that. But he does it very generically in the Satipatthana Sutta. He says, aware of the internal and aware of the external. And I'm naming the external, which is the dynamics of oppression. We bring our presence and our caring to that dynamic in order to heal it. And in that relationship comes the wish to address it actively in whatever is appropriate for our lives, our bodies, our community. So then there's this environment of purifying the dynamic of ignorance and the greed, hatred, and delusion that comes from ignorance, and the polarization and insufficiency and inadequacy, which is the individual foundation for oppression to live. And then there is also, of course, there has to be something that is even stronger and more powerful and unlimited than the dynamic of ignorance. And that is our capacity for love and presence and healing and transformation. And that can never be destroyed, which is why we take refuge in our Buddha nature, because it can never be destroyed. Ignorance can be destroyed, but not this capacity. And it is always there. We might feel very far away from it, but that doesn't mean it isn't there. And that we can grow this capacity. And this day has been in honor of growing our capacity for joy and the practices around it, except because of the particular environment where find ourselves in, it feels important to somehow give a bigger frame for why we're practicing joy. And we're practicing it to strengthen this capacity to hold the ignorance and the expressions of ignorance. And it does. Joy strengthens the heart. So joy, just for those who don't know, joy is one of the factors of enlightenment, which is just another way of saying what I've been saying, is that it's a factor of enlightenment. It strengthens the heart and mind. And it's the joy that comes from non-distraction, and the joy that comes, which is concentration. And then there is the joy that comes, that we've been, the joy that comes from recollection. And I do want to say that not in our time so much in this culture, but certainly in when I was studying in Nepal, in Kathmandu, that recollection is a really, has been a really important part of liberating the mind in some different Asian countries. And when we recollect what is wholesome, of course, because wholesomeness is liberating. And in particular, we recollect the beautiful qualities. And from that recollection, joy, and the other non-distraction and concentration and equanimity and calm continue to grow and strengthen in the mind. And so I wanted to read the 11 traditional ways to develop rapture and joy. And first is wise attention. Second is remembering the virtues of the Buddha. The third is rejoicing in the Dharma. The fourth is rejoicing in the virtues of the Sangha. The fifth is considering our own virtue, which we practiced a little bit about. The sixth is remembering our generosity. The seventh is considering the virtue of the gods. That's the Brahma realms, or we could put Jesus Christ in that, in there, or I was trying to think in Islam what the name is of Muhammad, maybe. The eighth is reflecting on perfect peace. The ninth is avoiding persons overwhelmed with anger from ignorance. The 10th is reflecting on the suttas and teachings of the Buddha. And the 11th is inclining the mind towards joy. And not included in this, but I think we could include is the practice of gratitude, because the practice of gratitude brings so much joy. I'm not going to spend a lot of time around this because I feel like I've already been talking so much today. But just to go through each for a minute, maybe. Of course, wise attention is the greatest blessing that we can bring into our lives. This bringing our presence to whatever. And it reminds me of, again, what of my hero, Bishop Tutu, because he said, I pray every day, and my life is about my prayer. And that feels like such a beautiful simile of wise attention. I spend a certain amount of time every day in contemplation or in recollection or in prayer, and then try to realize that through my day. It's a beautiful way of bringing wise attention to our lives. And then remembering the virtues of the Buddha. There are 15 pages in the Visuddhimagga of recollecting the different virtues of the Buddha. Just to say one virtue, it is said that all these energies of ignorance that we have named and spoken about are very far away. They are far away from the Buddha's mind and heart, that none of them could come close because there was such purity in his mind and heart. And that we know there have been many wonderful teachers, including my root teacher, Ruth, who have awakened and supported us and have been imperfect in some ways. The reason we recollect in particular the virtues of the Buddha is because his heart and mind were perfected. And I think that is such a beautiful invitation to rest our minds, that there have been human beings whose hearts and minds have been perfected. And if it's hard for you to connect with this man who lived 2,600 years ago as someone to contemplate, there are others like Deepa Ma who've lived in our lifetimes, for some of us our lifetimes, who are considered arahants, who have perfected their minds and hearts, who've had a book written about them, so you can read that and rest your mind on that. Or it could be that we take just one expression of another human being who expressed moments of pure love or generosity, and we rest our minds there. So what we're really, when we talk about the recollection, we're talking about, can I rest my mind on expressions of any of the beautiful qualities as a way to stay connected to them and as a way to support the growth of joy, which is what happens when we do this. And then we can recollect the blessings of the Dharma for each of us, the amazing ways that it has helped to transform and guide us in our lives. And for me particularly, it is living with the guideline of, is this wholesome? Because if it is, it will support my and your well-being. Or is it unwholesome? And can I then drop the story of polarization? Because it's not true and will only bring unhappiness. Rejoicing in the virtues of the Sangha, taking moments to deeply appreciate those who have practiced alongside of us, to honor them and appreciate them. And then considering our own virtue. Sometimes we think because of our social considering, we can consider our virtue for a little bit and then that's enough. But actually, we can continue to consider our virtue over and over and over and over again. And it doesn't even have to be that we have to call in like tons of instances when one virtue has been practiced. We can go back to the same one over and over and over. That one time in the post office when I wasn't impatient, when I chose a line that ended up being the longer line, you know, and I wasn't impatient, I can keep going back to that. And the same for remembering our own generosity. Considering the virtue of the gods is in going to Buddhist cosmology and saying that there are those who through concentration and the purity of mind and heart live in other realms, who communicate with us, and we can consider their virtue and purity. How often do we reflect on perfect peace? I think that's such a beautiful invitation, reflecting on perfect peace, a mind and heart that is at peace. I want to go back one more to considering the virtue of gods, just to say, because who knows, but I remember once when I was lost in the woods in Massachusetts, and I didn't have any water, and I was lost like a long time by myself, and I actually thought, wow, I might die here. And as I was sitting on this rock, like, wow, I am really truly lost. I have no idea where the hell I am, and I'd been lost for hours and hours. This voice came through, and it said, "Get up and go in this direction," which felt like totally the wrong direction. And there are many stories in the suttas of what we might call angelic realms or other realms where we are guided by these voices, or we could just say it's an internal wisdom and intuition. But I have found it personally helpful to hold the possibility that there are other realms and other embodiments of wisdom that guide us in different ways. So reflecting on that, if that's something that appeals to you. And then the practice of gratitude, which we probably have heard before, and I'm not going to say because we're coming to the end of our day together. So I always love to end with a poem, and this is one of my favorite poems that I haven't actually read in a while, so I'm going to read it. And it's by Joy Harjo, which is who is our poet laureate for the United States, the first Indigenous woman to be invited to be a poet laureate for us. This is one of her earlier poems called Remember. Remember the sky that you were born under. Know each of the stars' stories. Remember the moon, know who she is. I met her in a bar once in Iowa City. Remember the sun's birth at dawn. That is the strongest point of time. Remember sundown and the giving away tonight. Remember your birth, how your mother struggled to give you form and breath. You are evidence of her life and her mother's and hers. Remember your father, his hands cradling your mother's flesh, and maybe her heart too, and maybe not. He is also life. Remember the earth whose skin you are, red earth, yellow earth, white earth, brown earth, black earth. We are earth. Remember the plants, trees, animal life who all have their tribes, their families, their histories too. Talk to them, listen to them. They are alive poems. Remember the wind. Remember her voice. She knows the origin of this universe. I heard her singing Kiowa war dance songs at the corner of 4th and Central once. Remember that you are all people, and that all people are you. Remember that you are this universe, and that this universe is you. Remember that all is in motion, is growing, is you. Remember that language comes from this. Remember the dance that language is, that life is. Remember to remember. Let's take a moment and sit together. Thank you, everyone, for your presence, your participation, and your practice. I would like to share the merit of our time together and all that has manifested with Irene and all those of you at Insight San Diego who helped bring this one-day online gathering into being. I'd like to include all those who have supported us so that we could be here today together, our ancestors, the movements for freedom and liberation. We offer the merits of our practice. Thank you, everyone. Lovely to see those of you who I know, and lovely to see those of you who I don't and hope to in the future. Take care.
Thank you.
And if you would like to get onto my newsletter to know my other teachings, you can go online, arinnaweisman.org, and get to see when and where I'm teaching next. Take care.